All right, let's dive into a time in American history that was just buzzing with change, the Progressive Movement. This was a period when people all over the country took a long, hard look at some serious problems. We're talking corrupt politics, dangerous industries, you name it, and decided, okay, enough is enough. But, as we're about to see, the idea of progress wasn't so simple. It had some really deep and pretty troubling contradictions.
But first, let me ask you a question that brings this whole era right into your kitchen. How could one single book, a work of fiction no less, completely revolutionize the safety of the food you eat, like every single day? The answer to that really shows you the explosive power a story can have to kickstart a national movement.
So, where did all this energy for reform come from? Well, it didn't start in the halls of Congress or in the White House. Nope. It started down in the trenches with a whole new breed of journalists who were not afraid to dig through the nation's, well, muck to show America what it really looked like.
They were called muckrakers. And these folks weren't just reporters writing down facts, they were investigators on a mission. Their whole goal was to uncover the ugly truths about, well, everything, from horrible working conditions to the insane power of corporate monopolies, and just lay it all out there for the American people to see. You could say they were the ones who really got the ball rolling.
Just look at two of the heavy hitters from that time, Upton Sinclair and Ida Tarbell. Sinclair wrote a novel called The Jungle, and his descriptions of Chicago's meatpacking plants were so graphic, so real, that the public completely freaked out. And that outrage literally forced the government to create new food safety laws. Meanwhile, you had Ida Tarbell, who used these incredibly detailed articles to just pick apart the reputation of the all-powerful Standard Oil monopoly, which helped lead to its eventual breakup. So you have a novel on one hand and investigative journalism on the other. Different tools, but the same powerful result: real, tangible reform.
So all this muckraking journalism basically lit a fire across the country. And with all these problems now out in the open, a new movement of reformers, the progressives, rose up to the challenge. They weren't just mad, they were organized. They actually had a plan to try and rebuild American society from the ground up.
And their to-do list? Wow, it was ambitious. Progressives believed the government had to step in and regulate big business. They wanted to protect consumers and workers from getting hurt or exploited. They wanted to save the nation's natural resources, clean up the crowded and, frankly, filthy cities, and, this was a huge one, get kids out of factories and into schools. But you know, this reform wasn't just about big laws coming from the top down. It was also about action on the ground. And a perfect example of this is a woman named Jane Addams. She was a true pioneer who saw the struggles of city life up close and personal, and she created something totally revolutionary to help: Hull House in Chicago. Hull House wasn't just some charity giving out handouts. It was designed to give people a hand up. Think of it like a community center on steroids, designed to empower people. It gave them practical tools to survive and succeed, things like medical care, English classes, even legal aid for immigrants and the poor. For thousands of people, it was an absolute lifeline in a really confusing new world. You see, the progressives had this core belief: if you want to fix the country's problems, you've got to fix the political system first. They felt like powerful politicians and party bosses had way too much control, and the average person had, well, pretty much none. Their solution? Simple: give the power back to the people. And to do this, they came up with this brilliant toolkit for direct democracy. First up, the initiative. This let regular citizens propose a law themselves. Then, if they got enough signatures, that law would go to a referendum, basically a public vote. And hey, if an elected official was doing a terrible job, citizens could use the recall to kick him out of office early. Altogether, these tools were a huge shift of power away from the old political machines and back to the voters.
And maybe their biggest political win was actually changing the U.S. Constitution. Get this, before the progressives, U.S. senators were chosen by state legislatures, which was a system just begging for corruption. Party bosses and big companies could buy influence behind closed doors, but the 17th Amendment blew those doors wide open. It put the power to elect senators directly into the hands of the voters in every state, and that fundamentally reshaped American democracy forever. So safer food, cleaner cities, a government that actually listens to the people, it all sounds pretty great, right? Like a golden age of reform. But there is a huge, glaring problem with this story of progress, and it forces us to ask a really critical question. Who was all this progress actually for?
Because at the exact same time, this was the era of Jim Crow. All across the South, a brutal system of laws was being built to enforce strict racial segregation. These laws were designed from the ground up to deny African Americans their most basic rights, and it led to things like horribly underfunded schools and separate, and far worse, public facilities. And the whole rotten system was held up by this one really insidious three-word phrase: separate but equal. That was the legal argument. The claim was that as long as the separate facilities for different races were equal, then everything was perfectly legal and constitutional. But here's the thing. In reality, they never ever were. And this idea was tragically locked into law by the Supreme Court in 1896 with the case Plessy versus Ferguson. It all started when Homer Plessy challenged a Louisiana law that segregated railroad cars, but the Supreme Court's ruling had massive, devastating consequences. They sided against him, officially making separate but equal the law of the land. This decision basically gave the legal green light to Jim Crow segregation all over the country for more than 50 years. But African Americans absolutely did not accept this injustice. As discrimination got worse, a new generation of leaders organized to fight back. Led by incredible thinkers like W.E.B. Du Bois, they formed the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP. Its mission was to wage a long, tough legal battle in the courts to demand the full civil rights that had been so cruelly denied. So in the end, we're left with this really complex legacy. The progressive era is, without a doubt, this powerful reminder that when citizens organize, they can achieve incredible things and make democracy stronger. But it's also a stark, critical lesson. It forces us to ask a question that we are still wrestling with today. When we talk about making progress, who gets to be a part of that change and who gets left behind?